Hello? Hello?
Podcast Network Asia.
Welcome to She Talks Peace, a podcast that highlights the role of women peacebuilders around the world in bringing lasting peace and security to communities. Eavesdrop on their communities and get to know their stories. From the Philippines to Malaysia, from Indonesia to Palestine, from Myanmar to the United States. Their dreams and hopes for a world without violence and a world where every woman and girl can be whoever she wants to be. Hosted by Amina Rasul Bernardo, President of the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy. This is She Talks Peace.
Salam, dear listeners. This is Amina Rasul of the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy saying hello, peace be with you from Manila. Welcome to She Talks Peace and thanks so much for joining us. My dear listeners, first I must share some sad news. Former President Fidel V. Ramos passed away last week on July 31. I was his presidential advisor on youth affairs, tasked with establishing a government agency to nurture youth and ensure that government plans incorporated their needs and aspirations. I organized the National Youth Commission for him. We mourn the loss of a leader who had a vision of a strong and resilient Philippines, of a government that was inclusive, of national leaders who truly cared for the welfare of their people as they worked to strengthen the economy and government institutions. He was steadfast and consistent in this commitment. That's why we called him Steady Eddie. He cared deeply for peace and reached out to groups fighting government. He made sure the affected communities, civil society, women, youth were consulted by government on the issues being negotiated. The negotiations with the Moro National Liberation Front finally resulted in the signing of the final peace agreement on September 2, 1996. This was the very first peace accord in Asia. President Ramos and MNLF Chair Miswari received the Felix Houphouët-Boigny Peace Prize. This UN award honors living individuals and active public or private bodies or institutions that have made a significant contribution to promoting, seeking, safeguarding, or maintaining peace in conformity with the Charter of the United Nations and the Constitution of UNESCO. The peace process definitely had its ups and downs, but President Ramos never let the downs deter him from the path to peace. Thank you, our Steady Eddie, for your consistency and constancy. You know, dear listeners, if President Ramos were alive today, I think he would be writing a column on the topic that we will be tackling, that of humanitarianism. World Humanitarian Day is commemorated every year on August 19 to pay tribute to humanitarian workers killed and injured in their work and to honor all aid and health workers who continue, despite the odds, to provide life-saving support and protection to people most in need. This day was designated in memory of the August 19, 2003 bomb attack on the Canal Hotel in Baghdad, killing 22 people, including the chief humanitarian in Iraq, Sergio Vieira de Mello. In 2009, the UN formalized the day as World Humanitarian Day. You know, today we are feeling the impact of crisis upon crisis, conflict, a climate crisis, COVID, oh my God, this global pandemic, hunger, displacement, extreme weather, Russia's war on Ukraine, which has worsened world supply of wheat, leading to rise in hunger in countries already reeling from poverty. It has created an economic crisis with the rise in gasoline prices, affecting countries like Sri Lanka. Did you see the television accounts of citizens overrunning the presidential palace, forcing the president to flee and the government to fall? And then just recently, China has waved the flag of war after Nancy Pelosi, US Speaker of the House, visited Taiwan. Geopolitics will most certainly send shockwaves that will reach our shores and might exacerbate humanitarian crisis. However, my dear listeners, optimism remains. The UN has actually distributed a handout on World Humanitarian Day, and it states, the truth that every hour of every day, humanitarian work continues and it saves lives. It may seem complex or far away. It is often invisible, but it is indispensable. This year, for World Humanitarian Day, we go back to basics to show the importance, effectiveness, and positive impact of humanitarian work. And the brochure goes on to say, there is a saying that goes, it takes a village to raise a child. Similarly, hashtag it takes a village to support a person in a humanitarian crisis is now the slogan for World Humanitarian Day. There are teams working all over the world helping millions of people every day. Now, according to UN Women, disasters kill more women than men and hit women's livelihoods hardest. According to their reports, 60%, for instance, of all maternal deaths take place in humanitarian settings, and all forms of gender-based violence against women and girls spike during disasters and conflict. Experience and research, according to UN Women, show that when women are included in humanitarian action, the entire community benefits. But despite this, women and girls are often excluded from decision-making processes that shape the response strategies that affect their ability and that of their community to recover from crisis. Women must be included in decision-making about the forms of assistance, means of delivery, and the provision of the protection and economic and social empowerment opportunities they need so they can be agents of change. And I 100% agree with that description by UN Women. Now, today, my dear listeners, we have as our guests three fantastic women from Mindanao who have been working tirelessly to address humanitarian crises and humanitarian problems. First, we have, I'm not going to say old because she's not that old, I am. We have Attorney Liza Masuhud Alamia, who is currently a member of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority and is the minority leader. The BTA is the parliament of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Our MP, Liza, chairs the task force for decommissioned combatants and their communities. She served in the then Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or ARM, as its first and only woman executive secretary. This was from 2013 to 2019. before ARM became BARM. In 2013, she was the first chairperson of the ARM Regional Human Rights Commission. She's an advocate and has always been an advocate for women and children's rights. She has represented and lawyered for marginalized women. And do you know that she's also a nurse? She is the founder and president of Kalisa Action Network, Inc., a network of women's groups and advocates that advances the rights and welfare of women and children in BARM and the Zamboanga Peninsula region. Our next guest is Melindy Banyas Malang, a humanitarian affairs officer with over 25 years of experience in humanitarian development and peace-building work in Mindanao. She is the head of the sub-office in Cotabato of the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or UN OCHA, and she chairs the Mindanao Humanitarian Team. It's a subnational coordination platform that involves all the other relevant UN agencies. She once served as the coordinator of peace education of the Notre Dame University, and she has been a teacher. Also, like Attorney Liza, she is a nurse and has a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Peace and Development. Our third guest is Daphne Makatimbol, who started working in humanitarian and development since 2008. In 2012, she joined the Nonviolent Peace Force in the Philippines. She is the gender advisor and leads the implementation of all their programs related to gender and women, peace, and security. Now, she has been working on child protection in emergencies, monitoring, and reporting mechanism on grave violations against children's rights. She's been involved in unarmed civilian protection and peacekeeping, and mental health and psychosocial support. Welcome, our dear MP, Liza Alamia. Welcome, Melindy, and welcome, Daphne, to She Talks Peace.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Miss
Hello,
Amina.
Liza. Hi, is that Melindy?
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Miss Amina. Salam.
And hi, Daphne. Good to see you.
Thank you po, Miss Amina, and Assalamualaikum, everyone.
You know, ladies, I really don't know where Attorney Liza gets her energy. She just arrived in Manila. I think she just got off the plane, and here she is already chatting with us. Liza, I really don't know how you manage it. Your work in the BTA, continuing your humanitarian work. Are you okay, our dear MP Liza?
I'm okay. I have other means of relaxation and also some debriefing moments.
Good for you. By the way, Attorney Liza, do you cook?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. We have to have a side conversation later because I have this idea for a cookbook that would weave in our history, I mean, among our indigenous communities with our cuisine. So let's chat about that. Cook to cook. I'm not as good a cook as you probably, but never mind. I mean, let's focus on an easier task for me, which is to talk to you about humanitarian work. So let's start with our member of the parliament, Liza Alamia.
Yes.
You have always known that the role of women and how women add value and sustainability to reconstructing the lives and communities of our people is critical to success. So tell me, MP Liza, what has your experience been in the autonomous region? Are women fulfilling their role? Are women making an impact? And is our government supporting our women?
Well, definitely women are making an impact. Bangsamoro women and even other women who go to the BARM and the previous autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao are making an impact. But if you ask me if this impact comes from a number of women that's sufficient enough to create a more impact, the answer would be negative because there are only a few women who are actually involved. So, for example, if it is about humanitarian responses, there are a lot of women who are involved. But when it comes to decision making and policy making, so like for example, my experience has ranged from doing human rights work and human rights advocacy to humanitarian response when in 2013 I together with other personalities from the ARMM set up the first ARMM Humanitarian Emergency Action and Response Team, or the ARM HEART, which has now been renamed as BARM Ready in the current dispensation. So when we first started, there were only a few women involved in actual response, and there were only a few women involved in policy making, in decision making as to the directions of all the plans and programs that were being implemented. It's the same now in the BARM, or maybe even worse, because there are only 13 of us out of 80 in the parliament. So 13 women out of 80 members of the parliament. And so I have experienced some challenges in pushing for policies for women and children, especially women and children who are in the middle of displacement or who are in conflict affected areas. So like I filed an IDP bill in 2019. It would be the first IDP law in the country, considering that the IDP law at the national level has not been passed. So it has been very difficult because the bill is languishing right now at the committee level. So it's not a
Yeah,
priority. It's
yeah,
not
but
a
uh, excuse me for butting in, Attorney Liza.
yes.
There may be few of you, but I've had conversations with the other women members of parliament, and I think there may be fewer quantity, but quality-wise, I think you're really making a big difference in the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. But what you have cited, the fact that there are less women in decision making, it's something that it's not just true for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, but nationally and internationally. And this is maybe I should ask Melindy, who's with the UN. Melindy, what is really being done so that we can have more women being part of decision making, participating in managing programs, especially in the field of humanitarian work? I mean, are we having a setback here, less women, or are there moves to push for more women in decision making?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Amina. And I think everyone agrees that when crisis hits, pre-existing conditions already exist in terms of vulnerability and risk for women. And these are reinforced the moment there will be disasters. So within OCHA, even here in Mindanao now, it's really like a priority. It's one, having gender equality is as a parity. Gender parity is really like it's a non-negotiable. It's one of the priority of the organization. And in fact, here in Mindanao, we have our gender expert given for, sent here to improve our integration of our gender, the gender aspect in humanitarian response. So currently, we're looking into the different gaps in coordination, in leadership, even in how we implement the programs. And there would be a successive action plan that will be implemented to make our gender programming in humanitarian response stronger. So yeah, there's that conscious undertaking that's going on, and the one that will benefit this, even if it's among us, the team, the Mindanao humanitarian team, it will eventually, benefit the communities we serve, because this is really about having greater accountability to the affected populations, which is majority that are unserved or underserved are women and children.
I'm glad you have that optimism. But let's ask Daphne. Daphne, you've been working at the ground level in humanitarian and development work. So tell us what you've seen at the community level. Are more women involved, and when women are involved, what impact do they make in the communities that you've worked in?
Yes, thank you for that, Ma'am Amina. I agree with the both of the two speakers, no, with Attorney Liza and Miss Melindy, that the women are disproportionately represented. No, when it comes to the at the grassroots level, for example, during the humanitarian crisis, when the Marawi siege, transpired, there's a lot of I think organizations that also look into how women will be, how to maximize the potentials of Maranao women in terms of economic enterprise. So and it really, I think for me, impacted the response, that organizations provided during the Marawi response, when they did services in terms of economic and livelihood opportunities for women. Since that time, because of the situation, men have a limited access to livelihood, and women are facing multiple burden because of that. So when the organizations provided that access to economic opportunities for women, it also somehow elevated or provided some certain level of ease when it comes to the needs of the family. And when it comes to grassroots participation, women's participation, uh, at this moment, I think there is a platform for women to participate, but not not all women in the community. Let's say maybe women leaders have platform, but those women in the communities who are like ordinary mothers or ordinary women in the community have still very limited opportunities for participation.
We haven't really reached out enough to the ground level. That's what you're saying, Daphne.
Yes po. That's
We need to,
why,
we
like,
need
for
to
example,
reach out more.
yeah, with nonviolent peace force po, our one of the areas that we are focusing now is working with the Bangsamoro Islamic Women Auxiliary Brigade. That's the armed wing of the MILF in terms of the normalization process, because as you can see, in terms of the ratio of number of decommissioned combatants, women combatants have lesser in terms of the ratio. So nonviolent peace force, with the support of other international donors, we are also working with these former women combatants to support them in terms of the their reintegration to the community, and how they will contribute as well in terms of the sustaining the gains of the peace process at the grassroots level.
I think Attorney Liza probably has a lot more experience than the three of us when it comes to engaging with women at the community level, because long before she joined BARM as a senior official, she had been working tirelessly with the NGO community. Attorney Liza, the work that you were doing, engaging women in Basilan, in Zamboanga, and in other places, was it difficult to get women to become more participatory in decision making? Was there a cultural impediment? And how did you overcome that to get women to assume more leadership roles?
Well, yeah, that's true. There were some impediments, especially cultural and pseudo religious
Ah,
impediments. Yes. But eventually, when we were able to, for example, get champions from the men,
mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the key interventions that was successful at that time, is to get champions from men to support women who would like to be more politically active, not in politics, not just in politics, but become leaders of organizations or in their communities, or even in groups of barangay health workers, for example, or hilot. So these impediments, once their minds have been opened and they have undergone capacity building, you can see that women are very adaptive to any situation, and they're raring to really contribute. And so I agree with what Daphne was saying. That's why even until now, as chair of GPH TFDCC, I've been pushing for the involvement of women. This is the clamor of organizations like Daphne's organization and the BWAB. So I've been pushing for the involvement of women in dispute settlement mechanisms, not just in the RIDO, but also in the ongoing GPH MILF peace process. Like, for example, the independent oversight or implementing bodies on normalization and decommissioning, comes transformation, including disarmament or these small arms
Mm-hmm.
and live this ammunitions management and transitional justice and reconciliation. So we're pushing for not just an increase in the number of decommissioned combatants who are women coming from the BWAB, but also an increase or the inclusion of BWAB women in the JPST. That's the Joint Peace and Security Task Force that was formed between the PNP, the AFP, and the MILF BIAF. So the BWAB should be
Yeah,
involved.
but Attorney Liza, I think first you have to share with us your secret about how you approach the men, starting with your husband. Because I think, ladies, Attorney Liza has a very supportive husband. So how did you manage that, Attorney Liza, to convert a macho Muslim man to support the participation of women as leaders?
Itausog man at that,
Oh
right?
my goodness. Yes.
So, very difficult. But actually, the opposite is true. I would say that I think the Bangsamoro men are more inclined to support women. It's just that women should assert more and explain what is the reason. Ma'am Amina knows this on how to approach. No, there are layers of approaching a multidimensional
Mm,
approach in
yes.
convincing men, including the ulama
Yes.
and decision makers the at the in the communities, and not it's not just using the law, it's also using religion, using feminist legal methodology. So I've used that when I was
Mm,
taking up my LLM, in trying to make an analysis of particular issues like harmful practices on the ground in Muslim communities, and then juxtaposing it with international law and the national laws and the laws that we have in the region. So if that's the case, and we look at the lived realities of women and children and appeal to their moral responsibility as men, that they have a responsibility to protect women and children. And so if we use that kind of approach and they see that there is a problem, and that the only way to resolve this or alleviate the situation is by, for example, following the law, or for example, let's manage the child marriages, the occurrences of child marriages in the barn, or gender-based violence, or even violence against LGBTQ, because that's also happening in the barn, and all the kinds of different kinds of violence in a conflict affected area, in a displacement situation. So it gets more difficult. So there are nuances to
Very
that.
complicated, yeah.
Very
But
complicated.
sisters, while Attorney Liza is grappling with improving the law so that it's more responsive, short of doing Lady Godiva strategies, because
Yes, yes.
that's completely haram. Let me ask Melindy and Daphne, in the communities, the programs that you're doing, how are you closing the gender gap, especially in humanitarian work? What are the strategies that you employ to try at least to close the gender gap? Let's start with Melindy, shall we?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Amina. Like within our coordination setup, there is this joint CP, Child Protection GBB working group, in which as OCHA, we also sit in that platform. And it's really interesting to listen, earlier you made mention that if women is involved in programming, everyone benefits. And we look into what's really the outcome, collective outcome, such that everyone would support the women's role. And I think in the last meeting that we had, there's really like a lot of discussions, what to do, how to improve the way things we are doing. And women within the humanitarian community, there's a lot of women humanitarian workers at the front line, and having them there help us achieve that goal, because there are issues that only women humanitarian can deal with, women in the communities, sensitive matters. And if it's not through women humanitarians, these issues will remain invisible, will not be seen, because they're afraid to talk about it. It's so sensitive. So I think by putting more women in leadership position in the communities, like among the volunteers, taking that lead in that community organizations, that would really help identify those gaps that we see, and there will be proper reporting, enhanced reporting mechanism, and that response would be given to those issues that are seen. I'm just sharing all of these discussions that we had in our in our last CPGBV meeting. And not only, after they report the problems in the community, what are we to do? It's really providing adequate resources and support in legal, and at the same time economically, because some women are afraid to come out. Those who face GBV are afraid to come out because they're so dependent, and there's less formal support economically that are given to them. So I think having that kind of leadership role at the community level is really crucial.
It's clearly you really need to try and close the gender gap, but I guess it's getting a little bit harder. I mean, the pandemic has shown us, the couple of years of the pandemic, that dried up resources for capacitating women, for instance, for work on humanitarian assistance. Now, a lot of the resources were really focused on dealing with the pandemic. So, Daphne, in your particular case, in the communities that you work, what was the strategy that you utilized to try and close the gender gap? Because, diba, women, they're even prevented from going out because of the fear of COVID, and also because of the rise, the continuing rise of threats of extremism. So, what was your strategy, Daphne?
Sorry. So in terms of the our strategies as well in improving no, gender gap, one of the areas that we are working into is strategically as well work with women leaders as champions, and those women leaders that we work with, they also become multipliers at their own communities. So in that way, we are not only like capacitating one women, but we're capacitating one community, of women. So that's also one of the strategy that we are working in terms of improving the gender gap. For example, in NP, we work closely with women leaders who are doing conflict resolution, mediation at the community level. So we include them in the mechanisms that we organize. We call it early warning, early response. So in that mechanism, we capacitate women leaders at the community who are already doing conflict resolutions, and those women became champions of their communities, and we also provide platform for them to engage other women in their communities as well, and even men. So we strategically identify women champions who can also bring the voices of other women and influence other women in their communities.
And it's for us, it's a no-brainer, right? You get
Yes.
women involved in anything, and the chances of success are improved because women are more. Maybe I'm biased, okay, but women are more inclusive because we think of family and children. We tend to be a little bit more forward looking, not short term. And maybe this is one of the reasons why ASEAN is now drafting a regional plan of action for women, peace, and security. Because I think maybe more leaders within ASEAN, within the member states, have finally figured, yeah, let's try and support more women to be engaged in women, peace, and security. The regional plan of action is still in draft form. The hope is that it will be approved during the meeting, the summit of the leaders of the member states. That's in November. But I have heard that the Philippines, which is the first country in Asia to have a national action plan on women, peace, and security, I have heard that we're not that happy with the the participation of women, with the engagement of women in issues of women, peace, and security. Liza, you were very much involved in the National Action Plan for Women, Peace, and Security. What do you think? Is this improving the participation of women, or should something more be done?
Yes, I was involved in the NAP WPS and the RAP, the Regional Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security during ARMM, which extended, spilled over into BARM. And then currently, the Bangsamoro Women Commission has also drafted, together with other women leaders, the RAP for BARM for Women, Peace and Security. But it's only for until 2022. But as you know, since 2019, when we were already drafting this, by 2020, the pandemic happened until now. And
Yes,
so there has been a delay and
right.
there have been barriers to the effective implementation of this plan. And we're looking at improving the plan and expanding this and making sure that it is implemented, especially on women, peace, and security, the issue of gender based violence in the context of in the context of conflict. And personally, I think we have to do more about this, because gender-based violence in a humanitarian situation are actually abuses that are rooted in power inequalities. So this would demand progressive policies, especially in the context of war, and then you have poverty, and then you have crisis, and this inequality is further exacerbated. So we need to recognize that a lot of these abuses that are happening, including the rape cases and other cases, are actually influenced by the women's economic autonomy. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we need to also focus on, and which is part of my work in Kalisa Action Network, or
Mm-hmm.
looking at their sense of capacity to earn and have financial resources of their own. Because if they feel that they do not have economic power, so in the
Right.
long run, no, women empowerment actually has two dimensions, and these are resources and agency. And so we
Mm-hmm.
should continue our efforts in investing in human development. And I think that should be incorporated in the National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. We can capacitate them, train them, what are their rights. But if they are not economically empowered, they don't have any source of financing
Yeah.
their lives, they don't have livelihoods, then they remain powerless. They don't have the agency to become the leaders that they should be,
Yeah.
that they are actually. So I think economic empowerment is very important.
Yep, you're absolutely right. You know, the decades that I've been working with women at the community level, at trying to help organize the stages, for instance, they would always say, "Help us first with livelihood." Because
Yes,
how can we help others when we don't even have money to pay the tricycle to come to this meeting? And
correct.
that absolutely makes sense. And we need to ensure that the economic empowerment of women is part of the plan. And I think in the regional plan of action of ASEAN, it is there. But as far as our own national action plan is concerned, Melindi, what are your comments? I mean, are we behind here? Are we delivering less than what is promised in the national action plan for women, peace, and security?
Thank you for following that up, Amina, because I also wanted to share that when it comes to planning processes, and even during pandemic, we know there had been some spike of GBV cases. Others are unreported or underreported. But within the humanitarian community, every time there's an emergency, we put together a humanitarian action plan, and it's really deliberate that we request all the clusters to look into the gender aspect of their programming, and that includes having a GAM, or gender and AIDS marker. So that's how we track whether the intervention, the planned interventions, would address the gender gap in this humanitarian response. There are a lot of efforts that are going on. I think even from among us, there's just a bit confusion as to GBV or gender equality programming, but nonetheless, this has been really a clarion call from the headquarters, regional office, and even with the RCHC, our head of the UN system, to really give, to strengthen the response, and to close this gender gap, and to address the different gender needs in the community. I think during pandemic, our the development wing of UN put together also another plan that would support all these planning processes of the government, and that includes also the gender aspect.
You know, sometimes, because I've been in government most of my life, and some leaders from civil society would always say, "Ay nako, Amina, planning and planning and planning. Just do it." What do you think, Daphne? How is the National Action Plan on WPS performing? I mean, are we delivering what is promised, or should more be done?
I think there were already certain milestones. We cannot say that there's none. No, there's already certain milestones, but there's still a lot more to be done. Especially at the grassroots level, increasing participation of women at the grassroots level. When we talk about women peace and security, is really very important to sustain. For example, here in Mindanao, especially at the Bangsamoro region, to sustain the gains of the peace process, there's really a need to engage more grassroots women at the and when we talk about PCBE, all the more that women should be engaged in this aspect.
Ay nako, sisters. I think our conversation could take hours and hours, and we'll still find more time is needed. But we have got some friends from Mindanao who want to join the conversation. Let's welcome them, shall we? We have Carmen Lauzon Gatmaitan, Memen. Hi, Memen. And there's Ken Mimbida, who is president of the University Peace Club. Ken, are you there? And we have Alvin Pembarat, who's from MSU Maguindanao. Hi, Alvin. Do we have Siti Akima?
I am Siti Akima Alipo, but you may call me Kim. You may call me Kim, but never call me Siti.
Okay. Welcome, welcome. So,
thank you.
this is your chance to ask questions from our wonderful humanitarian workers here. Memen, are you there? Oh, I think she's having problems logging in. So, would any of you want to react or ask a burning question from MP Liza, from Daphne, and from Melindy? Let's start with well, let's call them the roses. With our honorary roses. Alvin, do you have a question that you wanted to raise?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I am glad that I am the only man in this talk show, but okay. I have here a question. This is addressed to our three speakers. No, my question will be in the context of Maguindanao, where most tribe people, youth, and women do not get involved most of the time in humanitarian and social development, especially those who are in conflict-affected areas and marginalized islands and communities of Bangsamoro. Well, in IPDM, we adhere to reach out people, especially those in IP communities. However, there is this stigma. There is this stigma that women should only be doing this and that. So maybe it is because of what their culture has labeled them to be. Now, my question to our speakers, as a humanitarianist, do you think religion and culture are, I don't know if I'm using the exact word, are hindrances in maximizing the full potential of women in the context of Bangsamoro?
Wow, pang thesis yan ah. Attorney Liza, do you have a response to that?
That's almost similar to the question, one of the questions in my thesis at Ateneo de Manila University. Is religion a hindrance? Is Islam a hindrance? Are cultural beliefs of the IPs a hindrance? Actually, no. If you're going to use the gender lens, the feminist legal approach to read and reread holy texts, and also cultural practices and cultural beliefs, you will find that, in fact, specifically for Islam, Sharia is very supportive of women empowerment, women economic empowerment, and gender equality and gender justice. And there are sufficient, more than enough support for this. It's not a theory, but it's a concept, and it's a principle, a universal principle that is present in all religions. Well, I can vouch for Islam. So it's not a hindrance, but the hindrance is in the interpretation, in the belief, And
Yeah.
the interpretations that are being made is rooted in patriarchy, and that's the problem. I think all of the issues on gender, inequality, discrimination, violence, they are all rooted in patriarchy. And there's patriarchy in almost all communities, all societies, in all religions. And that is why we need to surface um, more leaders, not just the men, but especially women who are able to assert their rights within the context of their own culture or their own religion, like in this case, Islam. So it's not a hindrance. You can look at it as a glass halfway full or halfway empty, but I would like to look at it as a glass halfway full. So let's be positive, and we can actually find inspiration, in fact, in religion. But we
Me
need
too.
to root out patriarchy.
Me too. Me too, Attorney Liza. I'm a half full, glass half full kind of a person. How about Ken? Do you have a question
Yes.
that you want to raise of our speakers?
Sharing lang. Yes, good morning. Well, I agree with Ma'am Daphne. What Ma'am Daphne has said, that women have limited opportunities, but then I also see the increasing role of Muslim women in conflict, participating in conflict resolutions or in peace building, and that there's changing culture where there is now an increasing confidence of Muslim women as compared before, where we are expected to be conservative. This, despite the pronouncement of some datus emphasizing that women should concentrate their roles in their respective homes. Like I remember how some of our men respondents, when how are some respondents responded to our questions if when we implemented our study entitled Participation of Maranao Women in Settling Disputes in Conflict. And these men emphasized that women should concentrate their roles in their respective homes, and that there are many respondents who insist that women's major responsibility is domestic and they should not be allowed to resolve conflicts. But we have so many women now occupying higher positions and are part of peace building, fighting for women empowerment. And there are also men supporting of women. And I also agree what Ma'am Amina Rasul said, that we should get more women involved in everything, and yeah, we should encourage more collaborations and harmonies between men and between women to encourage and inspire others. Just it now.
Thanks for that, Ken. So I'm sure that you'll do a lot being president of the University Peace Club. Now let's go to Ken. Ken, do you have a question that you would like to raise with our speakers?
Yes, ma'am, I have here. So since World of Humanitarianism Day, it is about celebration of being humanism. So my question is, despite of pandemic and other bad things happening in our world, so how can a simple individual promote humanism?
Shall we start with Daphne? Daphne.
Yeah, I think you should always start with yourself. In Islam they say that a simple smile is already a sunnah. So that's the a free gift that you can share to anyone. So I think that's also one of the best form of humanism that you can exercise every day in your life.
Goodwill, no? Melindy, your response?
Yes, true. I think everyone can do it, can contribute. Humanism is really about saving lives and alleviating human suffering. It's about protection of civilians, and all of us have that capacity. Whether individual, within family, and within community, we just have to harness it to share more in our local area. So that's not exclusive to humanitarian organizations, but more so the first responders to any emergency is really the smallest unit, the family and the community themselves. So yeah, so hopefully we can strengthen that at the community level.
How about you, Attorney Liza?
I agree with what Melindy was saying. It starts in the family. So if you are a part of a family, I think you can start. So for the youth, for example, you can start that within the family, helping your siblings, helping your parents. It's something that it's not. They say that it is you have to develop the skills to be a humanitarian, but it's actually innate in every human being to care for someone other than your own self, and so I think that has to be nurtured, that has to be enhanced. Just a simple matter of reaching out to other people and being compassionate, even to animals, and I think I believe that taking care of pets for children, that's a good way to start developing in their personalities this compassion and being a humanist.
Yep, you're absolutely right there, Attorney Liza. Now, during the pandemic, I'm sure all of you have seen, instances of humanitarian work, heartfelt. Do you remember how, for instance, the community stores started? I mean, that was really fantastic. Now let's have Memen. Miss Carmen Lauzon Gatmaitan, do you have a
Hello,
question that
ma'am.
you want to raise? Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I agree with the speakers about the milestones on the women peace and security in the Philippines. And as you were also saying, Ma'am Amina, that there's also a regional action plan. But good news and bad news. In the Philippines, the first LGU that has an action plan on WPS, it's really the ARM, now the BARM. It's the only one in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines. So it's sad because we still need, no, the government to really bring this
Yep.
down to all the local government agencies and the local government units so that the WPS can really be implemented in the country. So that's one point. And a question now, specifically in celebration of the World Humanitarian Day, I'd like to ask Ma'am Milindi, because I was really very curious about the theme of the celebration this year. It was taken from the saying that you mentioned in the introduction, Ma'am Nina, that it takes a village to raise a child. But now this year's celebration is this in the Philippines only, or is it the global level where you're looking at it takes a village also to do humanitarian action? So I'm really curious and how is that going to be celebrated in the Philippines? To Ma'am Milindi.
Thank you, man, for bringing that up. So yes, that's really a global celebration. Different countries, different country offices will have their own way of celebrating and commemorating the World Humanitarian Day. Before WAC used to be, just to commemorate it used to be focused on commemorating the lives lost in line of humanitarian work. But now it's really about a campaign on the different concerns that we face in doing the humanitarian work. And the theme or the hashtag, "It Takes a Village to Raise a Child," is used this time to campaign more, gather more support into the different aspects of our work. So here, in Maguindanao, in BARM, we're having an IDP, a community assembly, and in SPMS, an area where we had protracted displacement. So it will be widely participated by different actors, because that's really our message, that it takes a village to support a humanitarian work. It takes a village to support water, sanitation, hygiene. It takes a village to expand gender, or to have gender parity, to have gender equality. So it takes everyone. It's not an action of one agency alone. It's not a function of one or two organizations alone, but even local communities, the IDPs themselves, those who are affected, the military, the non-state armed groups have to be all engaged, to respect the humanitarian law, and even to respect the humanitarian work, so we can have access, and people, the affected communities, will reach the, receive the aid that they need, and in that way we can save lives. So that's really the key message of World Humanitarian Day, that it takes everyone, not just the humanitarian workers, development, building, particularly in areas where we constantly have displacement. And where else in Barm do we have that, but in more so in the SPMS area. So that's where we hope to have we're having that commemoration and celebration of humanitarian work on this day, on August 19.
Thank you so much for that, Melindy. And now time has run out as usual. So shall we end by asking our speakers about their message to our listeners? And by the way, we have a substantial percentage who are young. Your message for them on why it takes a village. Attorney Liza?
Thank you very much, Ma'am Amina. And I totally agree that it takes a village to do humanitarian work, to provide humanitarian response. It is also talks about self-reliance and not relying on other people and other organizations or even the government to survive a humanitarian crisis. And so I really hope that with the celebration of the World Humanitarian Day, we also focus on women's participation and representation in humanitarian work. And I think this is the current political transition and transformation in the Bangsamoro region offers a very unique opportunity to address exclusion in political and civic spaces in the context of conflict and displacement. And so we should prioritize integration of gender responsive policies into all of these new systems, including the systems that we have established or are trying to establish on humanitarian response. Hopefully, we will be able to do this, inshallah.
Thank you, Attorney Liza. Daphne, what is your message on to our audience on it takes a village?
Yeah, it takes a village to do humanitarian action, because in every humanitarian situation, the first responders should be, the village who are, who are directly affected from the humanitarian crisis. So each individual in the community has a significant role to play in to address their current situation, and hopefully in those significant roles, hopefully women will also be able to play their significant role in addressing crisis situations. It's not only the humanitarian actors who are responsible in doing humanitarian work. If we can do it, you can also do it.
Thank you, Daphne. And Melindy, what's your message as we celebrate World Humanitarian Day?
Thank you very much, Amina, for this opportunity again. So, to all the listeners, young people, women, men, boys, young boys, and young girls, it takes a village to do a humanitarian action. Whatever contribution we can give, that is really important. What we work on, what we believe on, matters, and giving our small contribution will really, it will have a multiplier effect. And hopefully to the young people who are listening to this podcast, that we will be purposive, as early, as young as we are now, we are purposive in what we do. We look at our life with a mission and a plan, and see that in a bigger worldview, how we can contribute. Whatever you're doing, hopefully you can include the work for humanity. Your contribution, your voluntarism would start no matter how young you are at this stage. So thank you, Amina, for this opportunity to flag our work, and particularly the World Humanitarian Day.
Well,
thank you.
It's time for us to say our farewells again. This has been an interesting hour of conversation. And I must thank our Member of Parliament, Attorney Liza Alamia, our representative from the UN, Melindi Malang, and Daphne from the Nonviolent Peace Force, Daphne Makatimbol, and the guests who joined us from Mindanao to ask their questions. So thank you so much, Alvin, Ken, Kim, and my dear Memen for joining us. So meanwhile, I echo what our guests have said. It takes a village to support humanitarian work, but I particularly like what Daphne said, that sometimes all it takes is a smile to turn a non-friend into a friend. And that could be the start of humanitarianism, of humanitarian work. So thank you all for listening to us. Thank you for our fantastic guests today. This is Amina Rasul from the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy saying bye for now and see you again next week for another episode of She Talks Peace. Bye!
She Talks Peace is brought to you in partnership with Podcast Network Asia and Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. For more information, check out their website at podcastnetwork.asia and podmetrics.co.
The views and opinions expressed by the podcast creators, hosts, and guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy and position of Podcast Network Asia, the hosts of the program, or other programs of the network. Any content provided by the people on the podcast are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything.